All right, we're back on Morning Line, our final segment this morning with Kristi Kelly and Jax Finkel. Kristi joining us from Michigan, Jax Finkel from Texas. They've both been involved in the process of legalizing marijuana medically or recreationally in their states. Go ahead, you two, if you can respond to Ann's question, wondering what she can do about this and whether or not you think there's some truth in what she says about the pharmaceutical companies maybe being against the marijuana moving forward because it takes some money out of their pockets.
Well, I can jump in.
Sure.
And the first thing that I would suggest, and it sounds like you are already active in your political process, but get to know your elected officials locally as well as at the state and in Congress. Who are the voices that are the most likely to change the laws? It's going to be the people right there who are making them. And so get involved, get active. There are a number of groups that you can jump in on, both medical and policy groups that are always looking for additional voices to jump into the discussion. So that's where I would start, and then from there, it's hard to say how people spend their money or what their other priorities are, and so I try not to worry too much about how people have invested in one thing or another. We've heard also that a number of pharmaceutical companies are interested in monitoring the progress of legalization because they'd like very much to get in. So I think it could be it could go both ways. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is get good policy for Tennesseans who are trying to get legal access. And so, that's what this is about. This is not necessarily what someone's personal investments look like. It's really about, are we doing what we need to do to help represent the people of the state of Tennessee?
Sure. And Jax, was there a pushback at all, Jax, in your state, to your knowledge at all, pharmaceuticals involved lobbying against it, or is that a fallacy?
We often hear that private prisons and pharmaceuticals are invested in this. And while I don't want to discredit that because it can be the case, we have not seen that substantially be the case here. Texas closed down quite a few private prisons. When you actually go in and look at their FEC reports, you're not really truly seeing large donations from pharmaceutical companies. So I don't want to say that that doesn't happen, but I don't think that that's a prevalent issue here. But I think that she was also talking about, I just drive over here to go get it. And in Texas, we are surrounded by medical states. Multiple of them have reciprocity. We also have some legal states surrounding us too. So the only thing we're doing by not creating a robust market here in Texas is penalizing the people of Texas, or penalizing the people who come to Texas and happen to have this product with them and get caught with it and be arrested. Because we arrest tens of thousands of people a year for this in Texas. And possession of a flower is a criminal misdemeanor, and possession of concentrates is a felony. And the fact is that this policy doesn't work anymore. And so we can talk about the rightness and the goodness and the efficacy of medical cannabis, but in the same hand, we need to talk about the wasted taxpayer funds on implementing these failed policies again and again. And so the only real opposition that we saw in Texas to medical cannabis was Executive Law Enforcement Association. Mm-hmm. They stood in the way of it. They did not want to have this access, and we continue to see them stand in the way. Over the years, we've been able to bring them to the table and have them join in the conversations around penalty reduction and bring them to more of a neutral stance, and that's been very important. So I would tell your listener, in addition to the legislative process, engage with law enforcement, engage with those associations. And I'm not sure how it works in Tennessee, but in Texas, the city council controls the budget for the city. So for example, in Austin, they cut any budget for THC testing and arresting. And we can do that here, but other parts of the state, they can't do that. So I'm not sure how that works in Tennessee, but find any little nook and cranny you can get in there and try to break it open. Yeah, well, and that's what I think's happened here in Nashville. The district attorney here in Nashville will not prosecute for less than half an ounce of marijuana. He just doesn't even bother with it. It's not even a citation. He's not going to prosecute. And what's interesting to me, I think you both know that, there is a giant legal CBD market out there. CBD oil and the like is legal here in Tennessee. I think up to 0.3% is it of THC in it, okay? It can have some THC in it, not enough to affect you in any way. But here's the crazy thing in Tennessee.
the drug dogs and the officers smelling or seeing cannot tell the difference between hemp bud and marijuana bud. And the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, unless it's a suitcase full of this stuff, is not testing for level of THC. So I don't even know how they enforce it. If I were someone caught with a few joints in my pocket and they want to write me up for marijuana, I'm going to say, great, prove it's pot. Right? How are you going to do that if you're not testing?
Expensive testing.
Right.
I mean, we had the same problem here in Texas. In fact, we told them after our last during our last legislative session, we said, listen, this hemp bill passing means 0.3 THC is legal now in Texas. You need to decriminalize, or you are going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on testing cannabis. And unfortunately, some of the rural areas have continued to do that. A lot of urban areas have, as you've said, unless it's a large amount, they're not going to mess with it. So I think that that's an important conversation. Also going, to the drug testing we were talking about whenever you're driving. Now you can have this, non-psychoactive, if you will, low THC hemp oil, and you can consume it, and you're not going to be heavily altered or have an extreme sense of euphoria. Mm-hmm. But yet, if you're pulled over and we were to do a blood test, THC would show up inside of your blood, right? Yeah. And so we need to have some real logical conversations about this. And I think because of this last year and a half and this testing issue that we've had in Texas, I think that's why we're seeing district attorneys, counties attorneys, and these law enforcement kind of changing their tune. They're seeing that it's not really efficacious to spend hundreds of dollars on each and every test. And furthermore, we have in Texas thousands of rape kits dating back to the 1990s. And I was told by a Houston forensics lab person that instead of testing rape kits, they are testing for THC content. And that is unconscionable, because in Texas, when we're arresting tens of thousands of people for a plant, yet we have 89% of car thefts go unsolved, 77% of sexual assaults go unsolved, a quarter of all murders go unsolved. We need to talk about taking law enforcement, respecting their time, respecting the work that they do, and really pointing them at these violent crimes, these property crimes, and making sure that we are not sending them to go take care of things that are no longer useful for us. So whenever people are talking about, law enforcement, for me, changing this law not only helps restore some of the relationship between law enforcement and some of the different communities, but it also honors their time and spends the taxpayer dollar on people who we really should be focusing on. And those are the violent criminals, property criminals, not people who are possessing small amounts of a plant.
As we have to wrap things up here, and I really appreciate you both coming on. This is great. I love having experts from other states join us on Zoom. This is good to have you both on. Kristi, maybe you can wrap up, and then if Jax, you want to jump in at the end, we just have about 3.5 minutes left. But what would you say then, and you seem to be pretty schooled on what's happening here in Tennessee and Nashville, Kristi, just moving forward right now, the legislature may be looking at passing something along the lines of medical marijuana, but they don't have, even if they do, a structure in place whereby people can purchase it here in the state, and they have to work through all that. And, is it a step-by-step thing? And do you see it ever happening in Tennessee?
Well, I can't speak for, I don't have a crystal ball, but I will say I understand the finer points of what's being discussed right now, and it's going to come back. It's going to be a brass tacks conversation, because you cannot allow someone to purchase cannabis in another state and then have them go back over state lines into Tennessee without them committing a felony because of cannabis's current federal status. So the way this current bill package as proposed is constructed, there is a fundamental discussion about the mechanics of how that legalization measure would potentially occur. Without that, it's setting medical patients, who are, by the way, the most vulnerable of the population, into a double jeopardy situation. Are you making a choice to save yourself and help yourself, or are you making a choice to potentially incriminate yourself? So there is absolutely more work to be done on it. We are wholly cheering on Tennessee and the leaders of the Senate who are advancing that bill forward. And we certainly hope for the best outcomes for the state.
All right, Jax, I think it's good that Texas in a lot of ways is very much like Tennessee, politically and otherwise, but you seem a step ahead on that. Would you agree going in that direction here in Tennessee, following Texas's lead, at least with medical marijuana?
Oh, 100%. I hope that Texas can join us and even create, or I'm sorry, Tennessee can join Texas and even create maybe a more robust, a better functioning program. You know, as Kristi said, when you're the first, sometimes you see the issues, we have to work through a lot of problems, but we've seen a lot of states do this. So Tennessee can take the things that works for Tennessee and make the best program possible for Tennessee and the patients there. And, you know, we're part of the Bible Belt here, and we think that, you know, the plant is something that can help people. And so come and join us on the medical cannabis front, and anybody in Tennessee who, you know, would like to talk about how we've done it here and take a look at the law, reach out to us. We've done a really thoughtful job of making sure that it is a well-regulated and controlled program.
Gotcha. Jax Finkel with Informed Texas, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And Kristi Kelly with Sozo Companies. Boy, thank you both for coming on. It's just it changes all the time. And you're right, we see it happening across the country, and everyone's talking about it. At some point, it will happen here in Tennessee. I really appreciate you both coming on with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you both.
You.
You guys take care. And we'll wrap things up now. Take a break. Have a programming note about tomorrow's show right after this. Stay with us.